Welcome everybody to this Dharma talk, which I'm calling Tilling the Soil of Friendliness. And it's based on a beautiful quote that I came across during the week, which I've woven this talk around. So I've been thinking about how deep in all of our hearts, I think we all want to live in a world that's in which friendliness and goodwill is the basis for our actions, the basis out of which our societies flourish and grow, and is the root of interactions between all beings. And so this week I've been on the internet just rereading, bits and pieces of visionary activists, the life work of people like Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela. And they've all championed, as you all probably well know, a culture in which individuals and society actually come from this root of friendliness and kindness. And their vision was one in which individuals and society nurture and experience dignity, care, and understanding through this kindness of heart and mind. And such a philosophy of kindness actually holds at the basis of a mature and open heart and mind in an individual, and then by extension, the basis of a dignified, healthy, and understanding society is this cooperation and goodwill. And in Buddhism, an open heart mind, or what the Buddha called citta, he referred to heart mind as citta, which covers all of our mind states, including the thoughts and emotions. An open heart mind that is mature naturally reveals and expresses unconditional friendliness. It naturally reveals and expresses an ethical intention for well-being and happiness towards oneself and others. And from a physiological and energetic perspective, the Heart Math Institute, which some of you might know their studies and their research work, they've found that the heart's magnetic field is around 100 times stronger than that of the brain's, which I thought was quite amazing. And it can be measured several feet away from the body. So when we're actually holding compassionate thoughts, our heart actually generates this, what the Heart Math Institute calls a coherent electromagnetic wave, which facilitates social coherence in whichever setting we're in, whether that be home or school, workplace, etc. So the more individuals are radiating this coherent heart wave, the larger the field, and then the easier it is for others to come into resonance with that field as well. It's really fascinating research. And I think we've all felt, such coherence, and we probably feel it more than we actually recognise or consciously sense when we're with loved ones or immersed in nature or on a meditation retreat perhaps, or involved in a meaningful social environmental cause, something that's, that really engages us from the heart. We all know what this coherent heart radiance feels like. And when we experience this coherence, the heart is actually felt as physically and energetically expansive. And there's a willingness to open to life as it is, I think. And we can keep responding to life as it happens, and which means we keep opening further into this open state. Or we might say that we're actually receiving more of ourselves and more of life into our heart. So this verse that I mentioned is by a 14th century Tibetan teacher, Longchenpa. And he expresses this flowering that occurs when this limitless quality of kindness is cultivated. And the verse is, "Out of the soil of friendliness grows the beautiful bloom of compassion, watered by the tears of joy, sheltered beneath the cool shade of the tree of equanimity." And so this verse, of course, describes, for those who are familiar with the teachings of the four Brahma Viharas, which literally means divine abodes, or it's sometimes translated as sublime attitudes or limitless qualities. And these can be cultivated and refined with training. But they're also inherent in our hearts. You know, we know friendliness or compassion straight away when it arises in response to something. The soil of friendliness, I read that and I just thought, what a beautiful image. It's such a beautiful image. And it really struck me, resonated for me right now with all that we're going through. And as a gardener, it really struck a chord. So as all gardeners know, when we want to cultivate strong, healthy, and maybe productive plants, we tend closely to the soil. So we look at what kind of state the soil is in, first of all. So we assess by the way that the soil looks and feels and smells, and maybe what's happening with the plants that are growing in the soil at the time. And then we respond by adding things like manure and potash and compost, water, etc., etc. So whatever is appropriate at the time that we have ascertained from this assessment. And then all the visual beauty, the goodness that we eat from our plates, from food that's been grown in that soil, for example, all results from this careful tending to the soil, the source of the flourishing. So we might look at our meditation practice, our day-to-day mindfulness practice in the same way. That mindfulness is the tool that we bring to connect us directly with what is here, to look closely at the soil of our situation. And along with this clear seeing that mindfulness brings, we also need an unconditional friendliness for our heart, mind, and for our situation. Because this brings empathy and tenderness to our human experience, which is often difficult, as we all know, and it allows this understanding to really settle in our hearts. So this relates to the two wings of practice, the two wings of the Dharma, the wisdom path and the compassion or friendliness path. So these two wings of awakening work together over time. And we might say they work together to till the soil, the ground of our experience. And the wing of wisdom is like the studying the soil of our life. It allows us to see what's here and really brings this discerning, investigative quality to light, so that we're not taking anything for granted, and really that we are really being honest with ourselves about our experience, about our life. And then on the other side, the wing of friendliness is like good compost that directly loosens the grip of our heart around fear, ill will, or anxiety, and the desire to have life be other than it is. And as I said, both these wings are necessary for understanding. Our heart doesn't really open until we have clear seeing and until we have compassion or friendliness. And with such deep understanding, we know empathy. So understanding and empathy come together in a mature heart. We know then that our own heart is not separate from that of others, and that our own suffering is not separate from others' suffering. With both clear seeing and empathy, we can't help but send goodwill to our own situation, to our own hearts, and we can't help but send friendliness and warmth to other beings to act for their well-being and liberation, because we know that it's synonymous with our own liberation, with our own well-being. But as with gardening, we often feel that we're not getting it right or we're on the wrong track. And this is okay. It's the ongoing intention that's important here, actually, that if in faith we simply keep looking and keep tending, even if we don't see anything at the start changing or shifting, that we will learn what leads to better soil, and we will learn what leads to a more open heart or more easeful mind, and conversely, what takes us further away from that. And as the Heart Math Institute studies showed, when we feel kindness, love, and compassion towards ourselves or others, we actually tune in. Quite literally, we connect energetically with the world around us. But when we don't, when we contract and turn away, give in to fear, or get stuck in criticism, cynicism, negativity, or we have, some dispute with the world, we actually feel our heart shut down to some degree, and we can become suspicious of life. And then the vested interest of the self easily takes the driver's seat. This is the vested interest that splits reality into an illusory me and you, an illusory us and them, and an illusory good and bad. This is the vested interest that believes the stories about what we lack, what we are, and what we aren't. And so this is seen in the teachings as aversion, which is one of the three fires that entangle us in continued suffering, the other two being sensual desire and delusion or ignorance. And we're all familiar with this state, I'm sure. It's part of being human, this aversive mind. This is the heart mind that resists and rejects and turns away from and feels animosity, And its quality is usually cold, hard, resistant, and distant to a degree. And I found a conversation piece by the writer John Rodell. I'm not sure if any of you know his writing. He's a poet and writer who I've just discovered. And he shows us how we pretty much react to life when it's not going the way we planned it. He started a really interesting project. He started typing to God on Facebook when he was going through a crisis of faith. And the back of his book says, God wrote back, I was just messing around. It turns out God wasn't. And he called it, hey John, hey God, hey John. And I think this piece that I'm about to read you really resonates with this idea of aversion that we hold in our minds. So John says, hey God, and God says, hello, my love. John says, the world is completely out of control. And God says, I know, it's such an adventure, right? And John says, no, it's like being on a runaway train. I need to feel like I'm in control of my life. And God says, you want to be in control? And John says, yes. We probably all know this, know how this story goes, right? We know this drill. When life throws us this kind of uncertainty and pain and unparalleled change, much as we're facing at the moment, our invested self goes into meltdown, and we want the stories, my views, my opinions to kind of be restored to authority in our world here. So in a word, we resist what's here. So John goes on. So God says, you're living on a spinning wet rock of a planet that resides next to a constantly exploding fireball in the middle of an ever-expanding universe that's filled with mysteries beyond your wildest imagination. And John says, yeah, okay. And then God says, and on this planet that you're hurtling through the great expanse in, you're cohabitating with billions of other people who have free will and their own experiences that shape their perspectives and beliefs. John says, yeah. And God says, and while all this is going on, your soul is residing in a physical body that is such a miracle of delicate engineering that at any given moment could produce its last heartbeat. John says, right. So this flinching from uncertainty, this terror of the unknown, is most obvious, I think, in our relational world with ourselves, just as John is expressing here. He's feeling this terror of uncertainty in his own inner life. But often we're really triggered by our responses to other people and by their responses to us. This is what can really land these kinds of anxieties for us. And I think recently we've probably all experienced something of these emotions when, or if we watch the news or tune into any kind of social or other media, or in conversation with friends and family, work colleagues, those in our community. The uncertainty felt in our current experience can really easily blossom into emotions that spin out of control and escalate and proliferate when we feel like the ground is disappearing from under our feet. Yeah. So then God says to John, what is it about your existence that you think you have any control of? What do you have control of? And John says, and God says, come on, you know the answer to this. What can you control? And John says, how kind I am to people. God said, yep, and one other thing. John says, what's that? And God says, how kind you are to yourself. Aside from that, most of everything else is a bit outside of your design. John says, that's a bit terrifying. And God says, all great adventures are. So that's John Rodell's story. So despite the ephemeral, fluid and impersonal nature of life that is expressed through this story, through this conversation, I think it shows we can still choose to act with intention, to act ethically, and to act with kindness. And traditionally, the Buddha taught kindness as the antidote for all ill will and negativity. The Buddha's senior disciple, Sariputta, says this beautifully in a sutta called the Sangiti Sutta. Sariputta says, "Friends, it is impossible, it cannot happen, that when the heart deliverance of loving kindness is maintained as one's foundation, when it's established, consolidated, and properly managed, ill will can invade the heart and remain. That is to say, the heart deliverance of loving kindness is the escape from ill will." We can't have a heart full of empathy and compassion and have a heart full of ill will at the same time. It's not possible, is what Sariputta is saying. And this makes sense to us, I think. Our heart can't be open and full of loving kindness and feel ill will at the same time. Which is why the Buddha encourages us to keep training in cultivating these qualities, because they literally fruit more kindness, more compassion, more joy, more equanimity as we cultivate them. Once the heart is opening and once the heart is open and we keep cultivating more openness, there is no limit to this expansion. As Longchenpa explains, once the soil of kindness has been tilled with care, the other immeasurable qualities of appreciative joy, equanimity, and compassion naturally bloom out of that attention, out of this soil of friendliness. And then, like a healthy garden system, each supports the flourishing of all the others in a heart that keeps expanding. If these qualities are present, aversion and ill will can't take a foothold and can't thrive. So traditional loving kindness practices start with the phrase, "May I?" And like we shared in the practice earlier, the words, "May I be safe and healthy. May I live with ease." So it's a wish, it's a direct intention and the planting of a seed within our hearts. It's actually forming an orientation for our lives in a certain direction. But whatever we wish for ourselves and for others, whatever words we use, it needs to light us up and engage our hearts, because there are these wishes, these intentions for ourselves are actually personal prayers for our lives. And they're personal prayers for our own flourishing and also for others. But how do we find kindness for ourselves and for others when we're feeling worn out and frustrated, swamped by fear and overwhelm? Or, how can we actually take refuge in kindness when life feels too much? And this is hard. It's a good inquiry. But in my experience, it's also really powerful medicine. Just to say on waking up in the morning, "May I refrain from beating myself up today," or "May I let ease into my life today." This is a powerful seed of intention and orientation for our own hearts and minds. May I be okay with the fear that's here right now. Holding our suffering like this in our hearts, giving it room, is all we need for friendliness, for warmth to flourish. And we can extend it out to other creatures, other beings, other people. May you, tree outside my window, be nourished by sunshine today. Friendliness can flourish in all these different ways. May all children everywhere be safe and healthy today. So all we need to do is find a crack, find a shaft of sunlight, we might say, some morsel of beauty and feeling. And this is all that's required to start tilling the soil of kindness in our heart. And if it all appears confusing and we feel stranded, we just start with this. We start with this. We stand still, take a breath, and turn towards the confusion and strandedness. Yeah. This is the life that's already here. Confusion, strandedness. And that right there is an act of true kindness. It actually doesn't take any more than that. So I'll finish there. So let's sit together for a moment in silence. May we all be safe and healthy. May we all know ease. May we know peace in our hearts and minds.